Hello everyone and welcome to my first PC build video here on YouTube. Today we have with us a $300 gaming PC built from only used parts and used to serve the purpose of running games at 1080p and deliver decent gaming performance. So let's go over the parts we have for this and what it can do in games today. So the main star of the show here is the Acer Aspire TC710. Now we will be removing the case, the GPU, the PSU, and leaving only the core components, which should be right here. The CPU, cooler, motherboard, 8GB stick of RAM with another 4GB stick for an additional 25 Aussie dollars, which makes us only 95 Aussie dollars down from our total 420 Aussie dollars budget, thanks to Gumtree and eBay. For the CPU, I have the i5-6400, which should provide enough gaming performance with its 4 cores, 4 threads, and 2.7 GHz core clock. Our motherboard is an Acer OEM H110 motherboard with a standard LGA 1151 socket, DDR3L RAM support, and standard connectors and standard form factor, which should be great for what we're aiming for today, as you'll see later. Like I said, that motherboard allows us to put it in this Antec NX800, which is a full ATX case with all the functions you need. Mesh front for airflow, RGB, tempered glass, and we only paid 60 Aussie for this. So for our power supply, this is the Thermaltake Smart RGB 600 watt 80 plus power supply. This should provide us enough power for our system today and room for further upgrades. And for 30 Aussie on Facebook Marketplace, I think that's an amazing deal. As for our boot drive, I went with a 120GB SSD from CEX, which costs 35 Aussie, but you can easily find 240 gigs for similar prices on eBay. I just went with this as I didn't have time, but it should still improve user experience. Now for our graphics card, I managed to snag an RX 480 4GB from XFX for 200 Aussie dollars. Now this is commonly touted as the worst model of this line, but it should provide enough performance despite being quite a hot and loud card. So without further ado, let's get into the build, and starting off we have the CPU, RAM, motherboard, core, so basically the core components of the system. So what you're gonna do is you want to unlatch this, just press down, drag out, and then lift up like so. As for the CPU, well, as you can see, it has little notches here, and if you zoom in, you can see slight notches over here. Yeah, it just pops up like that. So what you're gonna want to do is line up. Let me zoom out again so it's easier for you to see. Yeah, it won't focus, but you can see the notch here lines up like so. So yeah, just like that. And what you're gonna want to do is fold that down. See this, like this tab here, it has to be under this screw thing here. So once you've done that, you press down on the latch, round it around this pin thing here, and then just slide it under there. It requires a bit of force, so yeah, just force it as much as you can, but not too hard, by the way. So next up we have the RAM. We have a 4GB stick and an 8GB stick here, making a total of 12 gigabytes of RAM. So what you're gonna want to do is line up this notch down here with this notch here. Put two ends of the RAM first. Line it up with these. These latches, you usually have to open them because sometimes they're closed like this. So just open them up, line the RAM in, and then use both your thumbs to press down on it. Apply a decent amount of force until you hear it click in entirely. Repeat the process for the second stick, which is here. And there you go. You have the RAM done. So before you put the cooler on, there is something you have to do. Because I forgot and I'm an idiot, you have to use thermal paste. So I have some Arctic Silver 5, which is not that great of a thermal compound, but should serve our needs for today. So what you're gonna want is a pea-sized dot, like so. Yep, just that's a bit too much, I think, but it should work just fine. So yeah, the fan header, line it up like so. There you go. You have the fan header. There's a notch on top of the fan header usually, so it's pretty easy and straightforward for you to just line it up, I think. Line up the screw holes. There should be 4 on each corner and 1 on each corner, 4 corners, sorry. So what you're going to want to do is screw this in an X pattern. So this. Pretty simple, really. Don't screw in all the way for the corners. Just apply equal pressure so that it actually stays on the designated place. And, you know, have equal pressure for the CPU die. Almost hit the RAM there. Shouldn't be too much of an issue though. So that's the first one tightened. Second one. Third. And fourth. And there you go. If you can lift it up with just a cooler like this, you've done it. That's the CPU, motherboard, and RAM combo. So that's the CPU and motherboard combo done, and what we're gonna do now is we're gonna prep the case. And to prep that, you need to remove 2 screws for this back panel. And just slide it out like so. Grab your power supply here. So what you're gonna want to do is slide it in. There are screw holes here, which should line up with these holes down here. Yeah, there. So just slide them in like so. There should be a lot of stuff in the way there, so just force it in. What you're gonna want to do is line up these screw holes with these screws. It's pretty simple, just like so. And with those 4 screws, we have the power supply secure. So right now I'm just gonna show you how you can route all your cables so you can have optimal cable management right from the beginning. So first off, we have the 8-pin GPU power connector. So what you're gonna do is, there is a big hole on the left side here, and you're gonna slide that right through. So that it's easier to connect to the GPU. The 24-pin power connector for the motherboard goes through here. And we have the 8-pin / 4-pin CPU connector. This powers the CPU, so we will route it through the top, which is here. We just route it like so. Yep. And as for these cables, they are our front panel connectors, as you can see here. So there are usually holes. There are usually holes down in these areas, so you can just route them through there, and it should work perfectly for your system in terms of aesthetics, of course. So we're just gonna go ahead and do just that. Yep, there's the basic gist of it, really. The rest of the power supply cables, if you're not going to use them, what you can do is just to stuff them in and leave out only the ones you need. So I need these SATA power connectors for later, so I'm just going to leave them here. And leave them out here for now. Just put them where it's easy to see. So, yep. That's it. Alright, so that's the cables routed. About the fans here, they are pre-installed, so you don't need to do anything, just need to power them with this SATA power, which is already provided to us down there with the power supply. So yeah, that's basically it. I'm going to connect this right now, just to be sure we don't forget it later on. There you go, pretty simple. Moving on, here we have the case already prepped in terms of the basic cables, so just remove the front side panel, same way you did with the back side panels. Put the glass somewhere safe and it's protected. I'm just gonna lean it up against something so it doesn't tip over, because I don't have much space. But ideally you should put it on a bed. So first off, we have the I/O shield. It's basically just something to cover up this hole right here so dust doesn't get onto your motherboard. So what you're gonna want to do is line up the bottom here, which has the most ports, against the bottom of the board, and line up the 4 corners and press in hard until they all click in. Make sure it's all in before you proceed, as this process can be quite fiddly. Alright, I believe it's firmly in, so I think we can move on now. Alright, so with the I/O shield installed, it's time for the motherboard. So what you're going to want to do is, again, line up these ports right here with the holes on your I/O shield. So just line it up like so. Yep. And yeah. Grab your motherboard screws. They're usually just smaller than your case screws in case you can't see this clearly. So yeah. What you're gonna want to do is line up this, there's a hole in here and here. These are the screw holes for the motherboard, and yeah, you just want to line them up to secure the board in place. So like it doesn't jiggle around or whatever. Just tighten it up enough. These don't require a lot of pressure, so just keep that in mind. Alright, that should be the motherboard secured in place. Yeah, there's no connection problems, so let's move on to cabling, shall we? So first off, we have the 4-pin here. So what you're gonna want to do is just line it up. There are shapes on the pin on the ports, like these are different shapes, so you can line it up with the pins to determine what will work. So that's the 4-pin done. Yep. Usually modern motherboards have 8 pins, so you just install the full 8-pin, but since this one's only a 4-pin, we will only be installing the 4-pin. Yep. If you hear it click in, which means that means it's secure. Drag your power supply cable up. So there is a small little tab here that determines where the clip goes. So what you're gonna want to do is just line this up and just press down on it quite a bit. I'm having some issues with the cables a bit, so sorry, but that should be fine. Just press down on it. Make sure every pin is secure, or otherwise the system just won't power up, which is something I have experienced before with a loose 24 pin. So yeah, that's it. So for the front panel connectors, here we have the HD audio. Yeah, it's just a weird looking connector, but here as you can see it has it doesn't have a pin in this area. So just find the connector with one second pin missing in the top row. So for me that's here. That's the audio connector. It's the purple lavenderish one. So just connect it like so. Push down the cable, and yeah, that's the one I/O done. Here's the USB 2.0 header. So yeah, it just lines up just like the other ones. You might want to pad it up a bit below so it goes in a bit deeper and more secure. So yeah, that's basically it. And yeah, here's the USB 3 connector, which we can install, but we will not install because as you can see, with the PCIe bracket being right here, it gets in the way of the graphics card. So a bit unfortunate that we won't have USB 3, but it's just one port, so overall it doesn't matter that much. I can just add a card later if I want. Let's move on to the front panel. Alright, so let's connect the front panel connectors. As you can see, the front panel is number coded, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It starts with a hard disk drive LED, but since the power LEDs are more fiddly, I'm going to install that. So there's the positive and negative side. You want the positive to be on the outside. So positive and negative. And yes, that should be in. Grab the hard disk LED and do the same thing. Positive on the outside, negative on the inside. Sounds like Twitter users. Power switch is right next to the power LEDs. So yeah. And finally the reset switch, which is just right below. It's so hard to film because it's just really small, and if my hand works on it, it just covers the rest of it. So sorry in advance, but this is the best I can do. Trying to provide a clear explanation of what needs to be done. Try to secure the rest so you don't have any issues on trying to turn on the power supply and turning on the PC. So an extra, this is the header for the RGB fans. So what you're gonna want to do, these have 3 pins, so line up the 3 pins with the notch on them, so like so, and you're gonna want to just plug them in like that and leave out that other pin. It doesn't matter that much. So this will be our RGB stuff in the cable, so it doesn't get too in the way in terms of looks. And yeah, that's it for the front panel. Everything works. The USB 3, I can try to see if I can fit it later, but right now it just won't work, so I'm just going to stuff it back down, I think. Yep. Alright, with our front panels secure, it's time to connect our drives. So yeah. Alright, now we have our front panel connectors connected, of course. It's time to connect our drives. So we have these SATA cables here. So as you can see, they have this L-shaped thing popping up, and that lines up with this L shape. So what you're gonna want to do is just to line that up like so, and then push it in. It should clip in place like that, and then route the cables to the back of the cables. I'm gonna route it below the power cable so like it has more reach to the SSD in the back. Yep, like so. Second SATA cable is for the hard drive, which goes pretty much the same way. You clip this in like so, route the cable to the back through this hole right here. Right, yep, that should be it. So what you're gonna want to do is just turn the case around. So I'm just gonna back up to let you see the full picture. It's still a bit of a mess, but yeah, let's get the SSD in place. So funny thing about this hard drive cage is like you can slide it in like this, and it would still sort of stay in place, and you can just screw it in, but it's really hard to work with that way. So what I am going to do is to remove this cage. It's held in place with one screw, so just remove this cage right here, leave the screw somewhere you can find it. So yeah, just slide the SSD in place. Oops, oh, it's so hard to see like this. Yeah, just slide it in place. It stays pretty firm, so what you're gonna wanna do is grab one of these motherboard screws right here. So you just screw them into the hole so it stays secure in the bay. Uh-oh. Whoops, sorry about that. So what you're gonna want to do is line it up in the hole like so. Screw it in. You just need it to stay in place and not slide down to the bottom. So yeah, one screw's enough. So line up these notches back in here. Leave it. Whoops. It's so hard to do it at this angle. But yeah, just slide it in and then re-screw and screw that bracket back in. And you have secured the SSD in place. Yep. So now grab this SATA power cable, L shape, connect it to the short one here. Yeah, that should slot right in, and oops, might have. Alright, so just give me a second here. Alright, so this here is a SATA power cable. It connects to the longer one of the SATA, of the SSD here, so just connect it, line it up with the L shape, and there you go. That's the SSD. Alright, time for your hard drive.
So here is your hard drive. I would recommend just connecting the cables first because we're not going to screw this in place. Yeah, we're just going to connect the power and then yeah, just let it be going on its merry way. So the power cable goes in the same way it did with the SSD. Yep, there you go. And what you're gonna want to do is slide this into the hard drive cage. Just slide it in like that. You can screw it in for transport, but for the most part, I just don't do it. Stuff all the excess cabling inside here, so that like it stays pretty flat. What you can do is use cable ties, but it's not really necessary. Yeah. So cabling like that is actually okay for this case because it has a lot of room in the back to just stuff cables around. Alright, so you can either tie these for, you know, just so it remains a bit tidier than this, but for the most part this should work. So what you're gonna want to do is just to slap this on there, press down a bit, slide it in, and there you go. That's the back panel done. With our back panel and everything set up, we only have one more thing to do. Just unscrew these. Yep, there you go. Those are the two parts, two screws unscrewed. And as you can see here, these PCIe brackets are usually all removed already. But usually what you'll have to do is to remove them, either by pressing in and then wiggling them out, or just unscrew the PCIe bracket. It depends from case to case. So yeah. What you're gonna want to do, there's a notch here, and there is in fact a notch in the PCIe bracket, just like the RAM. So what you're gonna want to do is to line that up, like I'm trying to do here. Just line it up and then press in. It should click in just like the RAM, but a bit lighter. So just be warned with that. Right, so screw this back in to secure it in place. Remember, start with the bottom screw so that your GPU doesn't sag. Screw the top slot in. Alright, so the last step is just to grab your GPU power cable and then line up the pins and just push it until it clicks, like so. And there you go, we have a PC. Let's see if it works or not.
So our PC managed to boot into Windows just fine without any issues, so let's slide the glass panel on, screw the bolts in, and yeah, we have ourselves a gaming PC. With the build done, let's see how capable it is in 2022, shall we? First game on our list is Control, a 2019 AAA title that is known for its GPU intensive nature. It's running really well on our system at 1080p medium settings. It produces a 48 FPS average, which is more than enough to have an enjoyable experience with a game like this. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, a 2018 title, so not new by any means, but at 1080p high, it's still very GPU intensive, and we managed to squeeze out 67 average FPS, making this a really enjoyable experience. For Overwatch at 1080p low, we get 128 FPS on average. Now the i5 6400 is holding this system back with its 100% CPU usage being apparent, which makes it unsuitable for high FPS gaming, as you can see on screen. So Overwatch 2 performs very similarly to its first installment, but there is a 10% performance hit being apparent at the same 1080p low settings. Now, this is still an early beta, so I expect performance to be better with later patches, but it's overall still a really smooth experience with only occasional stutters. And with an average of over 100 FPS, you will have fun with this game. Forza Horizon 5, one of my favorite titles of 2021, continues to surprise me with how well it's running. At 1080p high, we're getting over 80 FPS, and this is an overall really smooth experience, despite it dropping to a 60 to 70 average in multi-competitor races. Moving on to Apex Legends. The game runs really smoothly. It's GPU intensive, so our i5 6400 doesn't hold our system back too much compared to games like Overwatch, and it's an overall very enjoyable experience, and I was able to have quite a few frags with this game. As for Fortnite, this game's a bit unoptimized right now, so even though we're seeing an average FPS of 112, it varies in different areas of the map, and like the stutters are consistent. Especially in the first few games you play if you open up your PC. It's a really common thing that has been seen for years in this game, and really hope the devs would fix this. Moving on to Halo Infinite. Now this title is not the most optimized one on the market, but we got this to run at an average of 46 FPS, which was smooth enough for me to play the game without much issues, though stuttering is still there and it's pretty prevalent. Next up on the list is Borderlands 3. Now this title was just given away for free by Epic Games, and it's quite GPU intensive from my experience. This system was able to handle it at 1080p high settings with 48 FPS and providing an overall really smooth and enjoyable experience, despite it not being quite enough for an FPS game. Now Valorant is another example of why you should have a strong CPU if you want to play esports titles at lower settings. As you can see, we have a pretty high average of 145 FPS, but we're held back by the CPU, and therefore we're lacking a lot in performance, and there are a lot of stutters. It's still an enjoyable experience though. The jutters you see are from my internet and not the game. So what are my thoughts on this system? Well, I think for $300, it's definitely a great system and can do a lot for you. But it's starting to show its age in certain tasks. Like editing. I edited this video on this machine and it struggled so hard. And yeah. So, would I recommend this build? Yes, 100%, but get a better CPU. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like the video if you did, dislike it if you didn't, subscribe if you want to see more future content from me, hopefully anyway, and yeah, I'll see you all next time.